Hello, welcome to WCC Wednesday. Today I am joined by my colleague Jeff, and I will let you introduce yourself. Who are you, Jeff? And what do you do?
Sure. My name is Jeff, and the last name is Wild. And I am a retired ELCA pastor living in Madison. And I serve congregations at Advent Lutheran in Madison, Janesville, Wisconsin, for 17 years. And my first calling was in Racine, Wisconsin, where I was for 4 years. I've been retired for about 8 years now.
So you have a hobby, a vocation, I don't know how you, a calling that you have taken up during your retirement years about turning guns into garden tools. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, your progression from hobby to calling is a good one. It's all of those. And I do regard this as a calling because I believe it's a convergence of the interest I've had through time, and it all adds up to becoming a blacksmith and trying to raise awareness about gun violence by turning firearms into garden tools. Um, Actually, it started when I was in college. I worked 2 summers in an iron foundry in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, where I grew up. And so I was not uh, unacquainted with hot steel. It's the molding, pouring iron process is different than blacksmithing, but there are similarities. It takes a lot of heat and it becomes very hot, but it didn't scare me away. I suppose another factor that really feeds into the convergence is being a pastor for 34 years. Over those years, I presided at a dozen funerals where the cause of death was by suicide. And half of those were suicide with firearms. And all of those were men, ranging in the age of from 25 up into the 80s. And I became deeply aware of its impact upon a community, a congregation, and family, and even upon my own being. You know, the range of grief is different from the type of relationship I had with those people, but and some of them had a deep and long established relationship, and so all of them were painful because I felt it didn't have to be that way, and I'm aware that suicide through firearms is generally a way that is very final. So that was one direction. Also, I'm a gardener. Right after I retired, I enrolled in a master gardening program and became a master gardener. And this was after founding the food pantry garden at Madison Christian Community, where I was a pastor that continues to harvest about 5,000 pounds of food annually for food pantries. And so with my interest in gardening and appreciation of good garden tools, followed by an article I read in the Christian Century after I retired by two fellows. One was Shane Claiborne, a well-known author, and the other a Mennonite pastor named Michael Martin, who is now executive director of Raw Tools in Colorado, and really very active in this movement to turn firearms into garden tools. I ordered the book they mentioned in the Christian Century article and read it. I probably read it 3 times now, and felt like this brings it all together for me. And so I decided to get a forge and start forging, blacksmithing firearms into garden tools. And like you mentioned, I see it as a calling, and at this time in my life.
So tell me more about that calling and your faith, and like, how do those two things, this project, how does that relate to your faith as a Christian, of this turning gardens into, or gardens, no, turning guns into garden tools?
Okay. Well, that's a thoughtful question. I've always had a deep interest in biblical and theological study, and so I believe deeply informed by an old Hebrew scholar or Hebrew Testament scholar, Walter Brueggemann. And the whole guns to garden tools, I think the foundational verses from Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. There's also a verse in Hosea that's the same, about God's promise of a new age to come and fulfillment of a new age, of a peaceable reign. And we're giving an insight into that right away at the beginning of Isaiah. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, which I think is a key verse for this whole movement. And as we look at that and study and reflect upon that verse, it's noticeable that it's about a transformation. The transformation of a weapon into a garden tool, which is quite radical when you think about it. And it's I think, a powerful image, which I believe, this was a couple thousand, 3,000 years ago. I still think it is a very powerful image to take a firearm and change it, transform it into a garden tool. And that makes a connection with our own spiritual lives. To me, the idea of transformation really rises to the forefront. And as Michael Martin and Shane Claiborne talk about, we not only have a gun problem, we have a heart problem. And I don't think that's being addressed by our elected officials. And I think this church has a special opportunity and role in addressing that, because it's a question of values. And we try to share and nurture biblically informed values and behaviors that follow from those values. So I think that transformation is really important, to think about that and how it happens within us, and how to lift that up in our congregations, especially in Wisconsin. I think also, because it comes from the book of Isaiah, this verse, is to think about it from a prophetic viewpoint. Prophetic prophet's role, we know it was above all else, to tell the truth, and to sometimes strongly criticize some of the lies and false beliefs and practices and behaviors that are being addressed in the prophetic books. And I have an opportunity to talk about the big lies that are promoted in our culture, and the myths that are being promoted in our culture, that support, it seems, people, that undergirds gun violence in our culture. And finally, I think it's to bring a message of hope, that we get to participate in the peaceable kingdom, the reign of God, in nonviolent ways, and to be a part of that transforming process, which I think is life-giving rather than life-diminishing.
Yeah, I love that and that invitation to like cultivate new life and do kind of that peaceable kingdom.
exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So so can you talk a little bit about the process? I come to you with a gun. What do you
Thank
do
you.
next?
Thank you. Well, it depends upon the firearm. I work primarily with rifles and shotguns because of the long barrels on them. My forge is portable, so I can go to different churches and communities and set it up. My anvil weighs 75 pounds, which is manageable. And I hook it up to my tank of propane like a person hooks up their grill to a gas grill. The difference is the forge is about the size of a microwave, but is really hot. It gets up to 2,200 degrees, which is what we need to heat up steel and mold it or bend it on the anvil. So I have a couple tools that I've made I can try to show on here. This is what's called a Maddock. And this was made from the barrel of a 22 rifle. Um, and it's not easy working with steel that has a hole in the middle. It's a little more risky, but the 22 barrels, you can easily pound them into a rectangular form in order to work with, and then to split them with a chisel and to shape them accordingly to that kind of tool. This one of the first tools I was making was of a tool like this, a hand spade. The handle itself is made from the barrel of a 22 also, where I just cut it up the middle and shaped the handle. That's pretty easy. My first tool actually is made from, this was my first gun from a friend shaped it for me, a pellet gun. This is a weeding tool, similar to what's called the Boston weeder. Right now, my pride and joy is working with shotguns that I can open up and split up the middle. And this is still the barrel of the gun here. And then open up and trimmed at the ends with a cutting tool. And then my handles are all made from, generally, the handles are made from pickaxe handles that I pick up at the Habitat Restore. A friend who's a woodworker shapes them for me on his lathe. So it's a joint project. The process is not quick, takes a lot of heat, a fair amount of pounding, and it takes time. So I sometimes wonder when I do a demonstration if people are getting bored because it's a lot of waiting. Involves a lot of waiting. And that's a time that people can use to ask questions, or when I'm working alone, it's a good time I can pray about gun violence and for God's direction, also for people whose lives have been impacted by gun violence, which now is all of us.
Yeah. So tell me a story. It sounds like, I mean, I can hear God in all of that, but do you have a story of when you have really noticed God showing up in this project?
Well, yeah, I'm a Lutheran, and so I have more confidence of God showing up in the sacraments, baptism and communion, and than I am with working with this. But I believe, first of all, there's been a remarkable affirmation and show of support for these efforts from people all over the country. It's surprising to me that when a news story goes out on a local, through a local media channel or print, that it gets way beyond Wisconsin. And I've heard back from people who express deep appreciation For example, one gentleman said, "I wish you were around after my brother took his own life. I went to the police station and was given the revolver he used to end his life. And it would have meant a great deal to me if I could have passed that handgun on to you." I think too, God is also working at in people's lives. This is a different kind of dialogue that I have than we generally see happening between political ends of the spectrum. Um, I've been surprised by some of the interactions I've had with people uh, that either was going to meet or have known for many years. I did an 3-month interim pastoral experience 5 years ago, and it was halftime. And before the pastor went on her sabbatical, she told me, "Oh, by the way, there's a couple women who pack handguns in their purses when they come to worship on Sunday," which really was a surprise to me. Another close friend from high school talks, when I invited him to a presentation, he said, "I'm really a Second Amendment person. I have a carry and conceal permit, and really don't want to participate in this." It's opened up some dialogue between us. I gave a long presentation at a camp a few weeks ago, and one person came to me afterward who said, after a political election, he was so worried about it, he went out and bought a handgun. And I said, "You still have it?" He said, "Yes." "Is it locked up?" He said, "No." "Is it loaded?" "Yes." And so we had a conversation about what the implications of that are. So I'm hoping God's Spirit is stirring people from thinking to acting in safer ways. Probably another way I feel God is showing up is the gun buyback that takes place this Saturday. Is have a wonderful group of 14 or 15 people that are going to be there helping with that effort. So I don't feel like I'm a lone ranger in this, and that there's a community supporting it as well. In addition, I've met many great people that I think God is working through all around the country. And the contacts have meant a lot, making contact with people like at the Wisconsin Council of Churches. Has been very meaningful for me. And I believe God's at work among us and through all of us.
So you mentioned this gun buyback event that's at Midvale Community Lutheran Church here in Madison from 9 to noon this Saturday.
This Saturday.
If there are other ways that people want to learn more, what should they do?
Well, so there's the gun buyback this Saturday. It sounds like we're in the preliminary stages of organizing a second gun buyback on the 10th anniversary of the Sandy Hook massacre at another partnership community on the east side of Madison, Christ the Solid Rock Baptist Church and Lake Edge United Church of Christ. And that would be early December. In addition to what else people can do is take an inventory of what's in their home. It's surprising how many people have guns laying around, and they can safely surrender them, or at least make sure that they're properly stored away or locked up. There's opportunities to give financially, and that I would refer people to raw tools, capital R, capital A, capital W, tools.org
And I
for
can
more
drop that in the
information.
comments for folks to see.
Yeah, for raw tools. And Raw is war spelled backwards. And the executive director is the co-author of the book Beating Guns, Michael Martin. And there's a site there. If they want to host blacksmithing demonstrations, they can contact me for that. And we could arrange a date that I could attend their faith community, meet with their faith community. And if they don't want a demonstration, I'm certainly done my homework and can talk about gun violence from a faith perspective, and it would be very willing to do that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your ministry and for sharing what is happening.
Thank you. Thanks for reaching out to me and having this conversation. That went fast.